Thank you. I want to say thank you again to the panel, and with that was a great transition. I have my first question I'm going to ask, and I'll direct this to Ken, and then it can pass on down. So, research suggests that a police agency's decision to focus attention and resources on particular motor vehicle violations, such as equipment violations, is likely to have a disproportionate impact on minorities. How can we address the problem to lessen the impact on minorities?
Good question, Earl. Thank you. We are still, as a state, dealing with the old vestiges of the war on drugs, so we need to first have a hard conversation about that. Law enforcement, being led by the federal government, for a long time was taught how to use the motor vehicle laws as part of the war on drugs, right? Because it is virtually impossible for anybody this evening to pull out of your parking spot and drive for more than probably 60 seconds without committing some technical violation of the motor vehicle laws, because they are written in such a way that makes it impossible. Most people have a violation of the current motor vehicle laws before they even put their key in the ignition. So we have to, first of all, move away from this idea that one group commits offenses more than others. Okay, that's not true, right? And then we have to try and understand, right, what is the primary goal of motor vehicle enforcement. Initially, right, the legislature puts motor vehicle laws in place to keep us safe, right, to make sure somebody isn't going 50 in a 25, to make sure somebody isn't blowing through that stop sign while our kids are playing in the front yard, right, to make sure that people aren't dying from not wearing their seatbelts. So the legislature over time has worked to build an infrastructure that makes us safe. And at the same time, they've built an infrastructure that makes police tax collectors. So I think one thing we can do is the legislature can stop asking police to collect taxes. Taxes in when you drive around with an unregistered vehicle, right? The police now are the ones that intercept that, right? They take the vehicle, they tow the vehicle, right? And so they're the tax collector for the state because you didn't pay your state bill. So I think we need to re-envision the role that police play in traffic enforcement. We can very easily, as a state, and I look at this from a state policy perspective, the legislature can very easily categorize motor vehicle laws as primary and secondary. And they can say, okay, these are all the primary laws, and if you violate one of these laws, police have the legal authority to pull you over, and we can be really specific. If you're speeding, if you're talking on your cell phone, if you run a stop sign, if you run a red light, all the things that are dangerous and cause accidents, and everything else is secondary. And so if they stop you because you're doing 50 and a 25 and it turns out that your registration is, your car is unregistered, they can deal with that then. But they shouldn't be acting right out there running plates for the sake of looking for essentially a state tax violation. So we've got one of the ways that we can curb the use of equipment stops, here's the deal. Right, a lot of data tells us for a very long period of time, and the data doesn't need to tell us because we know from people's lived experiences that the bar is lower for pulling over minority drivers, right? And so we use the window tints and the defective lighting and the right, and so I think we're at a point where we likely can't expect law enforcement to change that. They're using the tools they've been given. And so we've got to go back to the people that gave them the tools and say, I get why you gave them the tool, but guess what? The tool's impacting me more than it is everybody else, and that's not fair. And if the tool can't be applied equitably, then take the tool away from them, okay? And police will have to retool. It means that, you know, when they're dealing with a crime in a particular neighborhood, they won't go, you know, they'll have to find different ways to approach that. So I think as a state, we've got to reevaluate the tools we give police. We probably have to rein in some of the tools. We've got to rethink our motor vehicle laws and how they apply. And the last point I'll make is that, because I think it's a point worth sharing. I visited the vast majority of communities in the state of Connecticut, and there's a thought process out there, and I understand why it exists and it's important, that racial profiling is the biggest problem is in our cities. It's in our Bridgeport, in our Hartford, in our New Haven, in our Stamford, in our Waterbury. All the data tells us that where we as a state should primarily be focusing, if we're triaging, because I think that's what we're doing here, we're triaging, right? You've got a room in the house that's burning. You don't go, right, run the hose in the house where it isn't burning. It doesn't mean there's not problems in that room that need to be fixed. It just means that's not the room that's on fire. Our suburban communities that border our major cities are where we have historically seen the largest disparities. I can take the motor vehicle, I could take all the towns surrounding the city of Bridgeport, and I can map all of their stops, and what you'll see is essentially, if I did a heat map, you would see essentially a fence around the city of Bridgeport, and the same in Hartford, and the same in New Haven, because enforcement from the suburban communities is concentrated the closer you get to the city. Because there's a fear, right, that it's those people that are going to come into our town and commit crimes. The truth is that when you look at the Bridgeport PD data, they don't do a lot of the window tint, defective lighting, the low-level equipment and administrative offenses, likely because they're too busy. But where they're less busy is in Trumbull and in Stratford and in Fairfield and in Darien and in Wethersfield and so they tend to gravitate towards the border and they tend to lower the bar. And at the end of the day, I think what we've lost some of is the basic idea that everybody has the right to freedom of movement regardless of where you live. I'm dealing with a community outside of Hartford now that says, well, the reason why we do so much enforcement on the border of Hartford is because we have 2 grocery stores at the border, and all the people in the south end of Hartford come to use these grocery stores. Well, yeah, people need groceries. People need to buy food. And so we beef up enforcement for people that have the right to leave the city of Hartford so they can feed their families. And it's cultural. And some of the problems that we're struggling with in our role, and it gets to Ernie's point about the law not having enough teeth, is at the end of the day, we can shout until we're blue about the data and what it tells us, but if the department doesn't want to change, and oftentimes that change comes from the community. And so when you have these predominantly white communities saying, no, we're okay with that type of policing, we want the bad people from Bridgeport or Hartford or New Haven kept out of our community, so keep doing what you're doing, the police are going to respond to that because that's their constituency. And so we need to be a little bit more radical, I think, in the way we think about addressing this issue because we've left it for a long time to the police to solve. And the law, although the collection of data isn't voluntary, everything that happens after that is voluntary. And quite frankly, we haven't seen enough change fast enough because it's 20 years later since the original Alvin Penn law passed, and we're still grappling with this issue and things that could be solved very easily if there was the courage to solve them.
Another way we can lessen the problem is through education. As I mentioned, CHRO's mission is through advocacy, enforcement, and education, and we need to educate the public perhaps on why these certain types of what seem to be innocuous violations are, potentially pose a threat to the safety of our society. To us, rolling through a stop sign doesn't seem like that big a deal unless you have a small infant in the sidewalk that gets hit by a car that rolls through the stop sign. We need to educate the police on the importance of using the stops to demonstrate respectful authority and to utilize their broad discretion to educate and counsel rather than to always be so punitive and, on such a disparate and large proportion of our citizens. And then, to demonstrate common courtesy and respect on both sides. It goes both ways. When there's a traffic stop, I think whatever the tone is set from the beginning, if you will, and if you're respectful in the way that you approach people, usually you're treated in kind. And so I think that the traffic stop needs to start on a very respectful tone, and then we can analyze each situation on an individualized basis.
Yeah, I agree with both with Ken and what you said. When I first became a police officer, one of the best advices I ever received, a senior officer just about to retire, and he said, "Son, listen, you have tremendous powers, but you also have discretion. And you pull somebody over, the easiest thing to do in the world is to touch him, and now that person is under arrest, no matter what happens. He's under arrest. But you know what? You don't have to. You know, as long as they're polite to you, as long as they're compliant, and especially if they're with their family in the car, and, you know, why give that person a $150 ticket when that $150 could be groceries for the week? And it creates a horrible problem for that family. So I always treat people the way I want to be treated. You know, and I live by that golden rule. And I ask my officers to do the same. But you're right. We need to change the law. We can only enforce what's on the books. We are the enforcers of the law. We don't make the law. We're not the judges. We're not executioners. No, we enforce the law. And we need to change that law that are affecting our communities. Thank you.
I agree. I believe it's about education and informing the community, and obviously hearing what the community has to say so that we can bring it back to our officers and have better communication. We enforce the laws that are on the books, and obviously it has to start there because that is part of our responsibility as law enforcement officers. But I'd like you to know that we as police officers also hear communities when their concerns are about the person going through the stop sign and their kids were playing outside, or them being hit by someone that wasn't registered, or distracted driving. So there are grants and that are specifically for those reasons. So it's a matter of us communicating and letting the community know what some of the concerns are, and us hearing from the community as far as if we're not being courteous on a stop. I myself have heard the chief tell the officers, you do have discretion and you want to treat people as you want to be treated as well.
From my experience, one of the most difficult things when you're trying to enact change in law enforcement is to get buy-in. And I think the buy-in has to come with something Kirk said. It's character. It's presenting values and making those a compelling part of our narrative. And hopefully as we go on, we'll explain some of the ways that we've done that in our agency.
Let me say this. And I've been at least having dialogue that new recruits should stay in Bridgeport during their recruiting periods so that they can get a feel of what it's like to be a police officer in an urban area. There was a time when police officers lived in Bridgeport. They lived right next door to you. They brought their cars home. Those things have changed. We've got to somehow, with new recruits, because some people are set in their ways, you're not going to change them. And we've seen it in police departments. We've got to figure out a way that new recruits, as they're going through their training, should live in the city of Bridgeport. Why? Because they will get a feel of what it's like to work in an urban area. If I come from Monroe or Trumbull or Greenwich, I have no clue what it's like to work in an urban city like Bridgeport. So when I come with the attitude, I'm going to do my job, and I'm going home. But when you stay here and feel that you're a part of the community, it makes a difference. I will say that community policing, at least I see some of that happening in our city. I think Officer, yes, is doing a good job in getting those officers, Sergeant, is it Captain, Sergeant, that's in the East End. Blackwell. Captain Blackwell has done a hell of a job. And I say that because I will say this, that he has done a decent job in monitoring that police are out of their cars. He watches them. He comes around to make sure that you got to have community policing in order to change the mindset of some of the police that are there. And that's the only way we're going to do it. If they don't feel a connection to the community, all it is business as usual. So we've got to change that.
Yeah, I think it comes down to something very simple: criminal justice. A lot of times we talk about criminal justice reform. That's like a real buzz thing, but we wouldn't need criminal justice reform if there was actual justice that was taking place. So I think that based on what the chief said, that if the officers have discretion in a traffic violation to make certain decisions and things like that, I think the officer should be trying to be more on the side of justice as opposed to looking at people of color or people that they're stopping as criminals, because then it becomes a problem where now you're looking at people as targets that they should get violated or arrested because you're not really focused on the justice part of criminal justice, but the criminal aspect of it. So again, I think that the police department should highlight the ability of discretion when making a traffic stop for a minor traffic violation.
My next question, what are some of the barriers to good police-community relations, and what steps can be taken to eliminate them? Anyone can start.
I think some of the barriers is culture, right? So I think that overall, many times in urban communities like Bridgeport, like Baltimore, like Atlantic City, places like that, you're taught and raised not to trust the police, not to really respect the police, not to really revere the work that they do. And I think many times in the police departments, maybe there's a culture of implicit biases that affect the people that you're trying to police and, allegedly protect and serve. So I think that's something that really hinders the progress of community policing, which is something that people love talking about and love, going on and on about that, but there's a culture that creates a blockage from making people feel connected to the police and the police feeling connected to the people.
I think it starts with the chief, and it works itself down. If you get stopped, think about this. If I got stopped in Westport, and I lived in Westport, the officer will stop me, say, Mr. Newton, how you doing? Can I see your driver's license? Registration. It's how you talk to people. 90% of the problem the police department has is how to communicate with people. When I ask you for your driver's license and registration, I don't have to call you out of your name. I like the chief, but if chief yelled at me, my tendency is to yell back. Young people are no different. If you speak to them with respect, can I see your driver's license, your registration? But if I come up to your car and the first thing I say to you is get the F out of your car, put your hands out the window, don't move, what do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to respect. I'm going to react just like these brothers and sisters react. But it's about communicating, and you can't teach that. That's a culture thing to have respect, to be polite. And because you arrest me or you speak to me, even if I break the law, I'm still a human being. And it's about respect. And I think that, I don't know if there's courses to teach respect, but you can't legislate respect. And I think we've got to do a better job on how our officers and our people talk to one another. Because if you yell at me, I don't care if you're the Pope, my tendency is to yell back at you. A person gets stopped for a traffic violation, seatbelt, on Seaview Avenue. I'm talking about one that happened on Seaview Avenue. Traffic stop. It was wrong. So I think that it works only if you get some communication with young people. Thank you.
Folks, thank you for being a part of the conversation. It's not going to be aggressive or productive.
Tony, they can't do that. They can't do that.
So what I would say, some of the barriers to good police-community relations is, number one, I do agree definitely with the communication piece. Communication is key. If I'm speaking, you're speaking at the same time, if you're yelling, I'm yelling, we're not going to accomplish anything. We're not going to be able to send the message across, correct? So communication is key. Being able to change the culture in all facets is key, right? That's exactly what I said, sir. If I'm yelling and you're yelling, we're not communicating. We're not getting anything. Mm-hmm. Right. So, and that's in communication. Like I said, communication is key, and you can't have two people at the same time talking. It doesn't work, right? So that, and I think acquiring a complete narrative. So there are times when the message is sent out erroneously. This is what happened, but that's actually not what happened. So when the narrative is a correct narrative is sent out, then it's easier instead of having someone control a narrative that may not necessarily be correct. The days of community policing as a division within a department, those days are over. What we are looking for is community policing as a concept through our complete department, so that when we go to service the public and the community, everybody has the same mindset and the same concept. And that's what we are here today for, right? We're here to be able to establish those areas of policing. In regards to community policing, I will tell you really quickly that with the last several classes that we have graduated, we have done some tremendous efforts, and Mr. Newton will be able to testify to that we have done tremendous efforts in getting one second, okay? We were able to get our recruit officers out to the community and do different projects where they can, number one, meet the community, number two, acquire tools and resources so that when they go out in the field as police officers, they would be prepared to help the community. They did things like autism piece that is instrumental, and they changed the rules for communications department. They did raised funds for domestic violence awareness. They did a piece on MS, and they were able to go out in the community. They talked with the community, they learned about the community, and those were just a few of the things that we've been able to do with the previous classes that recently graduated.
Thank you so much. Could we please give a round of applause to the panelists for engaging us in discussion and dialogue. We do understand that this is a very passionate subject matter, and rightfully so, especially considering the sensitivity around racial profiling, not just here in our city, but also all across our country. So what we're going to do is allow the public to engage with the panelists. I'm going to ask that we be respectful of each other because we are a community. We all live here and want the best for the Bridgeport community, okay? So I'll start with the gentleman that's standing in front of me, since his hand's been raised for quite some time, and I'll get around to other folks. Yep.
Thank you. My name is John Lee. I'm here tonight representing the NAACP, where I'm communications committee chair. I'm just saying, I'm asking you to follow your own rules. If this was a 5:30 meeting that's going to end at 8, and if you're going to give half of the time to us, we're well over that. That hasn't been observed. So again, you get trust and respect when you deliver what's expected. I don't have a question. I'm here to listen. But there are a lot of people who do. So I'm glad you sensed by my hand going up in the air, because it's cues like that. It's just not always verbal, is it?
Thank you so much. We will go around and pass the mic. If you please just state your name and then your question.
Good evening. My name is Reverend James Morton, and I just want to make a statement. First of all, you have to look at the culture of the Bridgeport Police Department. There are only Hispanics and blacks because of a court order on the department. And we're not talking 50, 60 years ago. We're talking about 30, 40 years ago. And no disrespect to the Hispanic people that represent the police, but why aren't there any black people in the upper administration of the police department? You know, the civil rights movement was started by blacks. Now it's about LBGJQ, and blacks still haven't gotten their full representation. And I guess, no disrespect again, but I know there are qualified black officers that could be right there where some of the Hispanic officers are. And you have to understand that you have it only because we were out front. And that's my statement.
Thank you. Any more questions? We would like questions as well.
Thank you. First of all, there's a racial profiling is, of course, rooted in racism. All right? Racial profiling is just the tip of the iceberg. All right? Bridgeport police have a long history of police brutality, police murders that have gone unsolved, that no one has been punished for. A long history. And if you're really serious about this thing, there's a movement going on throughout America for police community control. Control of the police by a police community control board. I want to know if you are in favor of that. Just like the gentleman said, you cannot legislate, you cannot teach respect or morality. Police have to be controlled. As long as you are investigating yourself, that's like the fox guarding the hen house, right? The problem never gets solved. Are you for police community control? It's going on all over. Is Bridgeport ready for that? Because that's the only way this situation is going to stop. The only way. Are you for that? Each one of you, I want you to speak, let the people know, are you for police community control? Thank you.
Thank you. Could we give the, if you all would like to respond, probably rightfully so, the Chief of Police to respond to that, and then we'll move forward with the additional questions.
Sure. We do have a Board of Police Commissioners that is made out of regular citizens. Can I okay, you know, you.
Okay. So I just want to reiterate that we want this to be a rigorous dialogue between the public and the panelists. But in order for us to do that, we have to be respectful of each other. So I'm going to ask that if you're speaking from the floor, that you don't interrupt. And when the panelists are speaking, that you give them the opportunity to speak as well. At this time, we will, Chief, could you please continue to respond to the question and then we'll move forward.
Okay, so we do have a board of police commissioners that governs the Bridgeport Police Department. It's made out of regular citizens, you know, from the city of Bridgeport, and they do enforce our rules and regulations in the Bridgeport. So yeah, we don't police ourselves. We have community involvement that police the police department.
So just a technical response. The subpoena power issue for the Board of Police Commissioners, they have the authority to hold hearings. They have authority to impose discipline in certain matters, especially in regards to citizens' complaints. When it comes to policing ourselves, there have been, speaking about historical issues, including officers' use of force in the field that have resulted in deaths. Those would be investigated, not by the Bridgeport Police Department, but by either the state PD or the state PD in addition with the federal government. And that is basically our standard. We won't take something on to ourselves and just, you know, be the lead investigative agencies. In fact, we've recently had incidents that have occurred within the last 10 years or so where people have asked us for comments, and our standard line is we can't comment. We're not conducting the investigation. You have to talk to the state PD.
If I could just add, CHRO does have subpoena power, and if you file a complaint of discrimination with our agency, we can subpoena records as well as people through our investigation process.
All right. Could you also please stand when you're speaking? Thanks.
This question is for Mr. Barone. Mr. Barone, maybe 11 days ago, there was a newspaper article in the Middletown Press. You had mentioned that you was going to move on without the police department because you haven't gotten any response back. Sit down. So my question to you is, I'm a man of initiative. Did you give the police department alternatives, being the fact that they had lack of resources? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. It's being completely transparent, right? We have 107 police departments in the state of Connecticut, 169 towns, 107 departments that patrol those 169 towns. It's not a one-for-one because some towns don't have police departments and the state police patrol them. Okay. Of the 107 police departments, we have 94 municipal police departments, including the Bridgeport Police Department. Of the 94 municipal police departments, until May of 2018, when they were able to secure the resources to implement an electronic records management system, which is expensive, Bridgeport PD was collecting traffic stop data on paper forms. They were one of 7 departments collecting data that way. Okay. The process was data would be collected on a paper form. The form would go to a records clerk. The records clerk would enter that into the computer, and that's how we got it. We, because we're dealing with 107 agencies, don't want paper mailed to us, right? Bridgeport isn't the only agency we've got to deal with. We have many that we have to deal with. Okay. Several years ago, we did an audit of the Bridgeport Police Department's data because the numbers just seemed low to us. We looked at their data and said, how does a department that big only make 2,500 traffic stops? Maybe they do. So when we went in and we audited the data, what we found was that a lot of stops just weren't being reported. So we, at the time when we were addressing that with the department, they were also implementing their new records management system. So it was sort of in this place where we said, well, do we go back and put in an infrastructure to deal with the paper piece of it when paper's going away? Now, I'll be honest with you, a frustration of mine is that I understood the resource problems that Bridgeport had. The collecting data on paper and having to have records clerk enter paper into the system. I empathize with that struggle. But there were 6 other departments that also had that struggle and did figure it out. So from the state's perspective, some of our struggle has been, how long do we wait, right? I mean, we have the New London Police Department, although smaller in numbers, make 3 times as many traffic stops as Bridgeport, and to this day still operate on paper. But the infrastructure was in place to manage that. I tried not to, and still don't, try to spend a lot of time figuring out with the department why that occurs. I'm always just looking for a solution. And so every time that I was able to meet with the department, our goal was, how do we get to a solution? So they implemented the new system. Everything started being collected midway through 2018. Now, I've got to also be honest with you. I made a mistake. And so when I was under the belief, I don't know why, probably because I'm dealing with 107 departments, that Bridgeport had implemented their records management system a year earlier than they did. I was under the impression they implemented it midway through 2017. So 2018, we finally had good data. Thank goodness they collected it. We got everything we need. Oh no, they show up in our report. Well, hey, it's the first year of good data we got from Bridgeport. So now we got to go and do some work. Turns out I was a year off. So as the lieutenant had reached out after that article came out, we started to work to address this issue. One thing that I realized was that, okay, the first half of 2018 data really isn't that good. Again, you know, it is upsetting, right? Because we were still 5 years into this, 6 years into this. So I think that's an issue that likely could be addressed. But we found resolution. In the last 11 days, we found resolution. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that they reached out and have been working with us since that time to move us in the right direction. And we are no longer, as a state, moving on without them, right? And so the comment was, I got to go and I got to drill down and I got to produce a report on Bridgeport. And if I don't have a response from Bridgeport, well, the work still has to get done, so we'll do it without them. We're no longer doing that, right? They're at the table, they're sharing information, they're participating, and so I'm grateful for that, and I try not to look backwards but forwards to what we are able to do together.
If I could make one just comment in reverse that. So just speaking on behalf of the chief, one of the things that we've always acknowledged up front is that the Bridgeport Police Department is skillful in a lot of areas, but we cannot even hold a candle to the resources that, you know, Dr. Barone and his team have. And we're looking forward to the deep dive because we can't do it in-house. The statistics and the techniques that he's using to prepare the report is something that's far beyond our abilities. So we're actually hopeful that there's going to be no outliers, and if there are outliers, that's going to be an additional kind of motivator for us to take a deep dive into this issue because it is so important to the community.
Tony Barr, I'm sorry. I can't really stay because I have to pick my grandbaby up. But I wanted to say, touching back onto what Ernie said in regards to Allen Penn 20 years ago, and to this date, nothing's changed. So that's a problem itself. 20 years later, we're still addressing the same issue. We're still here 20 years later talking about that particular situation that took place with him. Now, the thing that I can't truly get is that we look at all the surrounding towns with the numbers reflecting, you know, balance and fair all across the board. Then the issue has to be, we have to really, if we're going to start facing reality and start facing things that make sense in here in Bridgeport, then we have to start facing that the community should reflect the community. The policing should reflect the community. I'm not here to play a racist game or none of that stuff. The problems are not taking place in Fairfield, Westport, Southport, Trumbull, Shelton, because the people there look just like them. This is not me playing, they don't have a right to be here as a white officer if he's not from here. Okay, if we have to teach an officer to be respectful, then he has no right to be an officer. If he's on the force and you're talking about we got to teach him how to be a police officer, he has no right to be serving in nobody's community, and especially our community. And one other thing I want to touch on, I have a good friend that lives in Greenwich, Connecticut. I have a lot of friends live in Southport, Westport, and I've been home out of incarceration 8 years. I got stopped one time in Southport. And my point to it is this. I felt safer in Southport with 4 white police officers than 4 white police officers in Bridgeport. It's just that simple. They've proven time and time again, and I'm not to beat the police up. You know, guys, I'm not here to undermine no one. I didn't feel comfortable right here in Bridgeport as a black man being pulled over, car towed, license, registration, insurance, everything, and my car gets towed, and I'm saying for what? Ticket, everything, put me through unnecessary. So this is a common thing in terms of how do we fix it? You guys are the big shots. How do we fix it? When do we start addressing the real problem? I don't want to keep coming here another 20 years and say, well, it's been another 40 years and we're at the same game. I love everyone. I'm sorry and I apologize. Love the police department. I know it's tough on you guys, but don't make it tough on the people that are here and living in the community. Okay?
Then we have a question here, and then
You know, just real quickly, the idea of like what can we do? I do think an area that the Bridgeport Police Department can explore, and hopefully it's something we'll explore with them, is that they search really the highest rate of cars in the state of Connecticut. 11% of all the car stops that they made last year resulted in a search. Now, let's just be careful about what's driving that, though. The vast majority of those searches are what we would categorize as inventory searches, meaning, right, the car is stopped for some sort of a, right, there's a suspended license, the car is unregistered, right, it's some sort of an administrative issue typically, and the department likely has an inventory search policy that says if the car has to be towed, which is dictated in state statute, right, X violation is found, car needs to be towed because, let's say the registration is unpaid, the officer has to search the vehicle so they can inventory the contents within the vehicle, right? Now, you know, I think we understand the nature of that and the reason for that, but, you know, something the department can look at is that the most effective use of our resources? And what impact is towing, the number of cars we tow in a year for administrative offenses, having on the community that we serve? And should we be thinking about maybe changing some of the rules around inventory searches and the types of, and the outcomes of stops? You know, the truth is that, you know, police, you know, the statute actually doesn't have a lot of discretion over towing vehicles for certain violations, but the truth is that at least what I've seen across the state is it does differ. You know, if you're stopped in Trumbull and you live in Trumbull for an unregistered vehicle, most of the time the cop says, take the car home, don't drive it, and if I see you out on the road again, then it's getting towed, right? Now, should they be doing that? We could argue no, right? That the statute says the vehicle should be towed because you have a violation that requires a tow. But, you know, again, the application of the law is different in different communities. And I think we have to have a conversation about what do we do about that.
I would add that progress is slow and change takes time. And while we're still here 20 years later talking about racial profiling, that change is occurring. 20 years ago, we didn't have a Chief Perez with a diversified administration who's willing to make those cultural changes, who's willing to take a look at the data and dive deeper. Those are the kinds of challenges that our committee has faced. We've received a lot of pushback from different police agencies across the state who don't want to hear that racial profiling exists in their community, who refuse to admit that their officers are violating people's civil rights. We have a police force here who's willing to work with us, but it's going to take time. Cultural changes start from the top. We've heard from his administrators that he's making those changes, and we have to have faith that the administrational changes throughout the city of Bridgeport, the administrators that are here who reflect the diversity throughout the city of Bridgeport are going to commit to making those changes in our beloved Bridgeport. I believe that Connecticut is leading the efforts around the country in racial profiling. I'm not a politician, but I do work for the state, and I represent everybody in the state. That's my job. So it's not about being a politician. It's about being real. Cultural change does take time. It's not going to change tomorrow. People with power do not give it up easily. You know that as well as I do. The people with the power are not giving it up. But I do believe they need to be held accountable, and you all need to come forward with the complaints. I've said many times, not only here in Bridgeport, but throughout the state, come to us with your complaints. People aren't complaining. They're not filing the complaints. They're not bringing them to us and giving us a chance to investigate it. So you got to do your part as well, not just talk the talk, but walk the talk. You got to come and file your complaints and give us a chance to investigate it.
We have a question for Mr. Hodges, and I'll get right over to you. I just, by a show of hands, how many people here knew about the Alvin Penn law before you walked in this room? How many people knew about that you should receive those cards every time you're stopped by the police?
Can I just say something real quick? So in reference to the towing, yes, there are SOPs, and for if you're going to tow a car, if a party is arrested, you are going to take an inventory because of things that have happened in the past with different allegations. So that is part of the standard procedure. As far as accountability, that's right, ma'am. That's why we're here, because we want to know, and we're part of the change for the future, for today, for tomorrow, so that when our successors come into play, they will know what we stand for, and that we are serious about knowing what's going on and are ready to make effective changes. And in regards to, like I said, we are making changes within the department. We do have a recruitment team. I know there was issue about the department being reflective of the city. We do have a recruitment team in place, and our recruitment team is reflective of the city. So we are doing everything possible to embrace the people with. I am born and raised in the city of Bridgeport, okay, and I am part of the community. So when I was recruited, right, I reflect the community as well. So we do have a diverse department. Would there be more, and would you like to see more? Yes, I am sure. But what I am telling you, we even offer the residents of the city of Bridgeport an additional incentive to take the test, and I'm talking about additional points when they take the test if they can prove that they live in the city of Bridgeport. So what I am saying is that we are taking those steps and moving forward. We are today for the tomorrow and for the people that we are going to leave in play when we leave the department.
My name is Fred Hodges, lifelong resident here of Bridgeport, Connecticut. Based on Ken and what the IMRP have brought and the information about the policies and how racial profiling has really impacted Bridgeport and being one of the highest in the state as far as racial profiling is concerned, with the population of Bridgeport being a majority half Hispanic and African American. What I want to know from you, Chief, and other ones here on the panel, what are you going to do about the information that Ken has brought up? I keep hearing you say communication, communication, communication. Nonverbal communication is the most powerful point of communication. And when the gentleman was trying to say something, I seen you shut down. And you as a police chief should have a little bit more tolerance than that, because you took the mic and put it right over there. So to me, that's an indication, because it all starts at the top. And I'm not saying you are the issue because of that, but in spite of that, you need to really take a look at yourself and how you dealt with that situation. Another thing I want to say about, I have a daughter, and she had stopped one day because her car had stopped, and the police was parked on the side. She's a college student. She walked up to the police car, and all the windows in the police car are tinted. How the hell you got all the tinted windows in the police car tinted? My daughter was intimidated of going up to the car. She said when she went to the car, the policeman just cracked the window and said, "How could I help you?" This is a 21-year-old girl. And what I want to know from you is, why do all the police cars got to have all the windows tinted? Now, I understand security protection for CIs or whatever the case may be. I can understand the back windows being tinted. But for the life of me, can you tell me why the front windows of the police cars are tinted? Because that's intimidation.
All right, in response to your question, yeah, well, I got a little upset. You know, I was trying to answer the questions, and I have enough respect that if he's talking or you're talking, I'm going to respect you, and I'm not going to speak. I may agree or may not disagree, but when I'm speaking, I think I deserve a little bit of respect also, and that's just why I get a little upset, and I apologize. So, well, you know, Cuban Americans too, you know, but you know, there's a time and a place, brother. There's a time and a place, you know. The gentleman that was here, Tony Barr, before, I go back a long way with him. In PT, that's when I cut my teeth in that area. And so when he had his little incident on Barnum Avenue, it was a bad day for him and for us. All right, he had just lost his brother, and he was getting a haircut, and he parked his vehicle on the side of the road. Traffic enforcement officer, who's not a police officer, did not show the proper respect, and Tony reacted, and it was from the heart. So he got arrested. The car was towed, and I understand exactly what he was saying. The first call that was made, it was made to my cell phone, and I went, I investigated, I returned his car, and I gave him a promise to appear, and then the whole thing was dismissed in court because it was a misunderstanding. Tony's a good man, but it's like you said, it's a two-way street. We need to respect one another. We need to understand one another. In regards to the tinted windows, it's a safety issue for the police officers. The windows are tinted on the sides, not on the front, and on the back. Okay, it's a defense mechanism. In New York last year, the year before, 2 police officers are sitting in the car, and somebody walked up to the car and killed them both. Okay, we don't have the monies that it takes to have protective glass on these vehicles. All right, and so this is the only thing that we have, and this is why one of the reasons, not just one, but one of the reasons, and also when you interview people and there's equipment in those vehicles that we don't want the public to see. All right, and it's to protect the public, but we don't want to expose the public to those things. So that's the reason why those things are tinted.
It's one of the highest cities that has that tint. I go all over the state and I really don't see that. And I think that's really an issue that the city really needs to look at, because I think it's pure intimidation. Because when you try to walk up to a police officer in Bridgeport, and this is about racial profiling, you get that Gestapo attack intimidation from them. You know what I mean? And uniforms, when people put on the uniform is a language. And when I was coming up, the uniform was almost like a male person, where it was more friendly. So now we have all this equipment on, and the us against them mentality, and I just want to, and that's probably part of the problem too with the racial profiling, is so there really has to be some diversity and some de-escalation from, not just from yous, but what is the consultant from the people that you have coming in, and what are the checks and balances? Are you going to have a committee of just plain citizens that are going to checks and balances and police diversity as far as de-escalation and helping them how to learn how to deal with the people in the city?
So one of the first things we did when I first took over, was we changed the uniforms. And you're correct. It was that mentality, the warrior mentality, where they had these vests, and you had, taser up here, extra magazines, and it looked intimidating. I want police officers to look like me, to look like the assistant chief or the chief. It's a uniform, and you're right. It is intimidating, but it doesn't have to be an occupying force. We are guardians. We are not warriors. We are guardians of society. We exist to serve and to protect the good people of the city of Bridgeport, people who live here, pay a lot of taxes, the people who do business in the city, the people who travel to this city, because there's a lot of good stuff that goes on in the city of Bridgeport. We have beautiful parks. So, yeah, I want my officers to look friendly, to do good things. Let me tell you, when they get out of line, I step on them, It's like a father correcting their children, and this is the way I look at it. You want to talk a little about diversity?
Now, with Ken's research, the final report is coming out in February. The final report is coming out in February, right? And I hope the police will do something about it.
That's one of the reasons why we're having this conversation.
Yeah, all right. Yes.
Hi panel, how are you doing tonight? Thank you guys for being present. My name is Leisha Andrews, and I am the regional representative for Bond. And even though I'm not here representing them, I just want to say that we are a tech company that was created by Uber that's providing the community with an alternative to 911. And if you're interested, I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards. or you could go to our website, ourbond.com. But my question is unrelated to bond. When I was working towards my undergraduate degree, I spent some time interning with the ACLU in Salt Lake City, and we frequently held what we called Know Your Rights trainings, which were essentially workshops open to the public, educating our community about their Bill of Rights and how to protect themselves from civil rights violations. For instance, educating the difference between an interview and custodial interrogation, or invoking the right to an attorney, reasonable expectation of privacy, and so forth. Are there any organizations that you're aware of that are actively doing this in the city of Bridgeport? One thing that I noticed when I was out pitching and introducing bond to the community was the militarization of the police force. We spent a lot of time with commuters because part of our app as well is like a safety app, not just an alternative 911. And parked outside the train station is a lot of police cars, but also over the summer there were several vehicles that look like tanks. We know militarizing the police force kind of desensitizes the community to high secure facilities and things, not just facilities, but it's part of the tactics, right, used in this prison industrial complex. Can you guys answer that question that I had about whether or not there are organizations doing Know Your Rights trainings, and also what is the purpose of these scare tactics?
As far as the Know Your Rights campaigns, I learned a number of years ago that you have to learn to stay in your lane. Okay, and so what I mean by that is that I had this bright idea probably like 7 years ago when we started this work, that we were going to put together a Know Your Rights campaign, and we were going to go around the state and let people know about the rights they have when interacting with law enforcement. And so we worked with the ACLU, and we worked with the NAACP, and we worked with, at the time we had a number of state commissions, African American Affairs Commission, Latino and Puerto Rican Affairs Commission as an example, to put together a campaign, and went out there. I don't know, maybe I did it 10 times, right? Different public libraries on Saturdays, and it didn't really hit me at the time, right? I'm still young, but I was even younger at the time. A young white male, you know, mostly of privilege, who was out there telling people that they had the right to refuse a consent search, and you know, when the cop pulls you over, this is what you say to him. And it just fell flat, right, because of who I was, and I didn't have the same lived experience as the folks that were attending these sessions. And so it was actually counterproductive. And so we, in our capacity as a university, decided we're going to stay in our lane. We're going to focus on research and data and public policy, because that's what we're good at. I know the Connecticut ACLU did continue the work of the Know Your Rights campaign, and has continued that since we essentially realized we probably weren't the appropriate messengers. The degree to which that type of training has saturated the market here in Bridgeport, I'm not sure. Yeah, it comes in, I think like everything, it comes in fits and starts, right? Depending on the organization have the ability to do that. So if there is an interest for that in Bridgeport, I could certainly direct folks to the people that would be most appropriate to put that on. But I learned it's just not me.
So our agency conducts training in a variety of areas. We cover 27 class spaces, and we investigate complaints of discrimination in employment, housing, public accommodation, and credit. So you can contact us through our website at ct.gov/CHRO. We're willing to tailor training for any organization as needed. Our deputy director is here, and she oversees our training and business institute. We enforce the state civil rights law, so we work closely with ACLU. We in fact had a meeting with them just yesterday to discuss our legislative agendas, and so we're willing to come to any event that you'd like us to have and provide information.
Just to answer really quick in regards to those specialized vehicles you saw, that's what we actually call them, specialized vehicles. What you saw over in the transportation hub was probably part of either a Viper or Cobra detail. Those are just basically code names for when we kind of meet up with our state and federal partners, and we have specialized equipment, including radiological detectors that basically serve a scan whenever there's a heightened state of awareness or whether we receive even a semi-credible threat that there might be an attack on our infrastructure. So that's when you see those vehicles deployed in that spot.
There's like police vehicles parked outside under the bridge in the train station downtown.
If there are white and blue SUVs, they would be the Metro North or the MTA police, and they go back and forth. One of their stations is actually there in the railroad station. They don't staff it 24 hours, but that is a spot where they most often congregate during the commuting hours.
We have another question back here. Thank you.
Kinsley Osei. I just recently sent this link to my fellow gentleman over here. Oregon State Police just banned the police from asking random questions when you were pulled over. Is this something that you guys will consider, a policy that you guys will consider?
So if I heard you correctly, there's a policy banning them from asking random questions?
Yes, Oregon Supreme Court just banned police officers from asking random questions during traffic stops.
Unfortunately, that is a district court that we'd have to actually look at the rulings that may or may not affect. I really couldn't comment without knowing the circumstances behind it. But obviously, if there's a change in the law of the land, we'll follow it.
Yeah, I don't think you're saying there's a change in the law of the land. It's a policy that they enacted in Oregon. He was wondering, would we be willing to or consider enacting the policy here?
I'd have to look into that because that is just like a really wide definition. So if I say to you, as we mentioned before, license and registration, obviously it's a procedural because I want to verify that a vehicle, is, capable of operating on the road in terms of insurance, in terms of registration. But if I went further and, asked a passenger for their ID, that could be, depending on the circumstances, either wholly appropriate or wholly inappropriate. So it's a really wide question. It's really not possible for me to answer.
As you know, there's many situations where citizen is always willing to give their license and registration, but officer always goes to the extent, where are you going? Why? This, that. And it just goes on and on and on where it's always the officer had the upper hand. And like my attorney always told me, the officer is always right. That's what I get paid for. And the moment that somebody is not willing to, somebody's not willing to respect the officer's questions, everything goes left. So that's pretty much what this policies is all about. The officer always have some type of probable cause for why they stop. And, a gentleman will ask you, why did you stop me? And it always goes from there.
So I co-chair a public policy subcommittee with the racial profiling committee, and one of the things we're looking at is changing or improving the definition of racial profiling, and that might be one of the other areas that we want to explore. So I will investigate the Oregon policy and bring that to our committee.
May I just say something? So there are times if you automatically assume that we're going to come in a negative way, we're stopping. So I've been an officer for 29 years, right? And there have been times that I've stopped the vehicle and I've asked a question like, how are you today? Because I'm trying to get the person to feel comfortable with me, knowing that I'm not foe, right? That I am there, obviously doing my job, but I want to establish a conversation. I want you to feel comfortable. So sometimes, I would say maybe some people would think that's unnecessary. How are you today? Why do you care, right? But it's really not, because I'm trying to establish a rapport with you and let you or allow you to feel comfortable with me so that we can proceed.
Clarification, and then maybe a question. Too many times we've seen our officers of color who are high-ranked not be promoted, who are qualified. We have to address those issues. We want to represent the community. Reverend Lord, President of Greater Bridgeport and NAACP. We want to represent the community, not just in the car, but up front. So we have some officers that have been overlooked maybe too many times lately, that we need to address why they're not being promoted. We see Hispanics, thank God for you, but we paved the way for you to be where you are. So why aren't the blacks being promoted who are qualified? Number one. Number two, in your study or in your data, is there data for how many white officers are stopping people of color versus black officers? If it's not there, we need to see it.
So I can tell you that in our department it's a testing procedure, right? The only position that's not the testing position would be the appointment, which I was just appointed as Assistant Chief of the City of Bridgeport's Police Department. But everything goes based on a testing procedure. Where do you rank on the test? And then they have to abide by the rank of the test as well. Right, it's the rule of one. So that, and obviously in order to take some of these tests, you have to have a certain amount of time in service. We, and I know that I have attempted to encourage all officers to take promotional exams, because you know what, we can be a part of the change, right? And we've encouraged it. Not everybody wants it, but I will say that it is definitely a testing procedure to move up within the ranks of the Bridgeport Police Department.
As far as the question around officers, right, there's I'm actually really grateful for the question because it gives me the opportunity to hopefully change the narrative on this. We've done a lot of officer level research, not only in the state of Connecticut, but across the country. We've partnered with other places that have more robust officer level data. We do have officer level data in here in the state of Connecticut. We do an officer level analysis so that we can figure out in the departments we identify if there are officers that are outliers, okay? And it's a fairly sophisticated, it's not simply looking at it and saying, well, this officer stopped 10% black drivers and this one stopped 20% black drivers, so this one must be the bad person, right? The test is fairly complicated, and essentially what you want to evaluate is people conducting traffic enforcement in the same areas at the same times of day for the same reasons. So then the question becomes, okay, so you stopped 5 cars on a Monday at 5 o'clock for registration violations in the summer, and you stopped 5 cars on a Monday at 5 o'clock for registration violations in the summer, but all 5 of the people you stopped were black, and only 2 of the people you stopped were black. I'm oversimplifying, but essentially you want to compare apples to apples. So because officers patrol different areas, they do different things for different reasons. If I'm on the traffic division, I might enforce different laws than a patrol officer, than a narcotics officer. So we have a fairly sophisticated way to root that out, okay? The idea about white officers versus black officers versus Hispanic officers, the vast majority of the officer level research that's been conducted across the country tells us that there is not a difference in disparities identified across racial groups. What drives the difference tends to be age and years of experience more than the race of the officer. So if we wanted to know if the race of the officer could be an indicator for whether or not they're more likely to stop people of a particular group, we haven't found any data to support that. We have found that years on the job is the biggest indicator. Younger officers tend to show up as having disparities more often. Part of that is because of the activity level. They tend to be a little bit more aggressive, newer. They're trying to cut their teeth. They're trying to prove themselves. And the biggest thing that the research tells us that will typically indicate disparate treatment, believe it or not, is not the race of the officer or racial attitudes of officers, but it is something that we call in the academic world masculinity threat. And officers that score higher in the masculinity threat assessment area tend to have more disparities in their data, and also those interactions tend to be more likely to result in use of force, right? And so oftentimes we've actually, there's a big study that we worked with John Jay College and New York University on this idea of masculinity threat. And even officers that explicitly showed significant racial attitudes had better results than those that showed little to no racial attitudes, but were really high on the masculinity threat scale. And so some of this is machismo, right? And it's a culture of because what masculinity threat really is if I feel threatened or questioned, right, the masculinity threat kicks in and I have to overcompensate. And so one of the problems that I think things we have to start talking about is the degree to which that can be addressed. And oftentimes that's cultural, that's personality driven, that requires a level of oversight, that requires a level of partnering. You know, typically younger officers exhibit higher masculinity threat than more experienced officers because your experience shapes the way you approach situations. So it's really complex, it's really fascinating. We do study it, and I've talked way longer than I should.
Let me just also address Reverend Lloyd's concern why there aren't any blacks in the upper movement of the police department. 90% of the police are in what we call unions, whether I like it or not, or you like it or not. And in order, and as we point, the special assistant or assistant chief, because she wasn't in a union, that position didn't call for a union. And as you already know, some of her colleagues have gone to file a class action suit to overturn the appointment of our assistant chief. So it's not that easy when you deal with a union that probably, and I will say this, and I could be wrong, Chief, is more concerned with not the diversity of the police department, but more about his officers moving up through the ranks. So as you already know, it's very hard to go outside the union. We thought about creating some positions in the police department. But what will happen is you can't do that because if we created 2 more assistant police chiefs, did away with the 2 deputy police chiefs that are in union bargaining negotiation, it would leave us open for a lawsuit. And I'm sure Tom Busey would be licking his lips to take on that case because he would win. So we've got to figure out another way because the unions are there to protect their workers. They're not there to protect diversity. They're there to protect the workers that's in their unions. And I haven't seen them speak up or speak out saying that we need more diversity in the police department. And so that's something that we have to address. But it's the unions that have stopped us from making those kind of appointments.
Thank you. So my name is Cass Shaw. I am a resident of Bridgeport. I work with the Council of Churches of Greater Bridgeport, and I'm a member of Faith Acts and many other things as well. But I appreciate this conversation, but I admit I'm frustrated as well because so much of it has been around the issue of racial profiling with traffic stops in Bridgeport. I have a couple of quick questions that are focused specifically on that. So first, Chief Perez, at every traffic stop in Bridgeport, is this card given out? That's my first quick question.
I don't know, but they have been told to do so. They're instructed to do so. I'm not there.
Okay. Are there instances in which people have complained about believing that they have been racially profiled in a traffic stop, of which you are aware by Bridgeport Police?
That I was aware or not aware?
You're not aware there have been any complaints in Bridgeport by residents who've been, or anybody stopped in Bridgeport for a traffic stop who have actually been able to complain that they believe that it might be racially profiling?
If any complaint comes to my attention of racial profiling, it's investigated by the Office of Internal Affairs.
Have there been any instances? So without revealing any confidential information, could you give us a sense of what you specifically are doing to address the problem that Bridgeport has because our disparities are greater than other municipalities? I mean, we're here because Bridgeport has a problem. And though, Mr. Barone, I appreciate that the ring around Bridgeport, you know, they're protecting their borders and all, but we're here because it's happening in Bridgeport. So can you give us a sense, Chief Perez, of what you're doing specifically to lower that gap?
Well, you're very welcome. We're looking into it. We're working with the state. We're working with Mr. Barone here, Ken. My officers in the department, the majority, the Bridgeport Police Department are minority police officers. We are diverse police. We reflect the community by far. So we address lineups. We speak to our young officers. They taught in the academy, you know, and the assistant chief can probably do a better job to answer this question than me. But yeah, we don't tolerate it, and we're doing something about it. The fact that we're all here, you know. And I think one of the questions was what can we do to change things? We need to have more meetings like this, you know. And I'm not offended by any questions, by the way. So.
Maybe add a finer point to that. When he says they're working with us, we will be producing a report specifically on the city of Bridgeport. Okay, and so what Bridgeport is doing is we've gone to them and said, here's the deal. In order for us to do this well, we need you to share all of this other information with us that we don't otherwise have. And they're putting that all together for us. So I think, right, I don't want to overstep. So in terms of our role with them has been to request and say, here's the deal. I need to figure out to what degree is crime in different neighborhoods playing a role in where you do enforcement, how are accidents playing a role, how are calls to 911 impacting traffic enforcement. I need to do an assessment of all your officers, which we're in the middle of. I need to look at all of the federally funded campaigns you work on. So you do click it or ticket campaigns. Where are you placing your spot checks or your DUI checkpoints? Why in this neighborhood, right? These are all the questions that we're doing. We will produce a specific report, likely in 3 to 4 months, just on Bridgeport. And then the question, I think, which might be fairer to the chief, is at that point, now you've seen what the state identified, and in that report, we'll make some recommendations and draw some conclusions. And then the question becomes, we've now done an assessment. What will you do with this information? So hopefully, in a few months, you'll be in a better position to answer that.
Excuse me, we have one question back here. It is actually 7:57, so we have very limited time for questions, so if you could be brief with your question.
This concern actually cost Mike Dukakis a presidential election. Those who remember. It's called history. This city, before I moved here, when I was in Boston, I went through the busing situation where communities were uplifted, buses were turned over, students were shipped from one part of the city to the other, and you just didn't have police being stopped or police officers stopping individuals. You had community burning areas. You got to remember, those who were here, and I'm speaking because I did a study on my master's, when 95 came through, it broke up 7 neighborhoods. Police officers here now were juniors or considering being police officers back there in the 80s, when the city of Bridgeport had the highest gunshotting in the nation at that time. The city was overrun by motorcycle groups, and there was a culture that was developed for protection of the community, protection of the police, and protection of all. I was a health officer here and I came here because I understood what the needs of the community had been at that time. But I had worked for the Attorney General in Mass who actually went through this program. And I will say there was an individual in the community, Ted Meekins, who had a community-based program. It was great. Why? Because we didn't just have this type of dialogue, we had a circle. And we made sure that the words from the street came and were expressed to the chief and the deputy chief, the fire chief, and everyone else. I believe that this dialogue has been positive. And I'm only speaking because those young people who had walked out, they should have stayed and listened and learnt rather than just putting their emotions on the table. When you put your emotions on the table, two things happen. An officer is going to get geared up, as we had spoken about, when they get out of the car saying, what am I walking into? Why do I have a camera? Why do I have a pistol? Why do I have to wear my vest? Because of their life. And if they die, it's going to cost us taxpayers money and everything else. And unfortunately, we have an officer that has passed, and we're going to be burying that individual soon. So you have to think of what the responsibilities are. And it's culture and education. The chief has a great program. It's an Explorer program tied with the schools. I believe that the next meeting that you have like this should be an exchange rather than you versus us and us versus them. A circle where an event can take place in a balance of exchange. There's great information that's been distributed, but I wonder if we've been hearing. Now, someone's going to look at me and say, he's a white guy. Well, no, I'm not. I'm Native American. And I've been a member of the NAACP in Boston since Mike Dukakis was governor. I got 27 years as a member of the NAA. I spoke at 2 national conventions. Why? The public health perception. When you take the public, and that's all of us, the police officers as well as us, the residents, we work together. I would believe those Explorer Scouts are a great unit. I would talk to the school board. You have a new school board. Why don't we do a program in the schools so that they can be properly educated rather than street educated on what their rights are, what the education is, and what the key word here, respect, on both sides. We've been asking the police to respect us, and the police are saying, we're trying to. Have we been respectful ourselves? Have we been respectful to the ministers? Where are they? A few of them spoke, but I think the association should be here, a group. I think this is a key issue. I talked with the bishop from the Catholic diocese who wanted to do a program on violence. He wanted to, and he was thinking about it, and then, unfortunately, we had some concerns. There is not just one group, there are many groups. And what I can say is, I would like to see this expand beyond what we have done, and the next time, if Mira can do something, put it together so it's a team. But just remember, if you looked at me and said, he's a white guy, have I been profiled? If I come up, wait a minute. I said, wait, please. What I'm saying is there's a balance. I'm wrapping it up. What I'm saying is there's a balance. We have something very positive that's taken place here this evening, and I would like it to continue, hopefully next time in an exchange. Thank you.
If I could just say something real quick, one last thing. You know, as the community representative here on the panel, I think that this is very reflective of what happens in the community. I'm just a regular, simple guy here living in Bridgeport, and there are great metrics and data, and you guys have said some remarkable things, but none of that moves me as a black man in the community. I'm still going to walk out of here feeling as, not safer, I'm not going to feel like I'm going to be less inclined to be stopped or racially profiled by the police. And there were great data, there were great metrics, but I'm glad you feel positive about it, but I don't walk out of here feeling much more confident or positive by the police force or that I won't be profiled. And I also think, lastly, that for everyone else that's here, I think we all should have the chief of police's number, because when people, I've heard 2 people tonight say they got pulled over and called the chief of police. But when I get pulled over, when Tyrone gets pulled over, when Malik gets pulled over, we can't call the chief of police. So and then Tyrone ends up in BCC and loses his job because we don't have access to the same resources that the politicians and the community leaders do. So again, I don't walk out of here feeling encouraged by this conversation. I do think that there needs to be more dialogue and conversation, but I don't really feel like I'm not going to be profiled as I go home tonight.
All right, folks, it's after 8 o'clock. I know that this is the beginning of a conversation, and some may feel more positive about it than others. Like, again, I say, this is the beginning of a conversation that the community needs to have, not along with just the police officers and city officials, but just within in ourselves and us all coming together, because that's the only way we're going to be able to resolve the situations that we have. And I think Ms. Hughes stated it too. A lot of people can get up and talk, but things change policy-wise if you're involved, whether that's at the city level or at the state level. If you're not involved, then nothing's going to change. Thank you.
Just lastly, if there's any food left, take it with you, please. On your way out, take it home.